You'd think every F1 driver is flashing supercars and luxury mansions, but some of the biggest names on the grid still remember their humble beginnings.
We started to join this place and it was much more convenient as well for flying, in and out.
From Lando Norris, who still eats like a college kid,
I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did, because I enjoyed it a lot.
to Esteban Ocan, who grew up in a caravan.
Forget they are who they are. Let's race them.
These F1 drivers still live like they are poor. Esteban Ocan. Esteban might be making millions in Formula One today, but the way he carries himself still feels like someone who knows exactly how close it all came to falling apart. Before the race wins and contracts, his story was built on one massive gamble. When he started showing real promise in karting, the costs quickly got out of hand. And instead of stepping back, his family made a decision that most people would never even consider. They sold their house, sold their garage, and went all in on his dream. From that point on, life looked completely different. For years, the Ocan family lived out of a caravan, traveling from track to track across Europe. That caravan wasn't just transport, it was their home, their kitchen, their base of operations. While other kids were growing up in stable homes, Ocan was living on the road, fully locked into racing. And the pressure wasn't just about winning anymore, it was about making sure that sacrifice actually meant something. That kind of upbringing doesn't just fade away once the money starts coming in. You can see it in how he lives today. Even with a Formula One salary and a Grand Prix win to his name, Ocan doesn't lean into the flashy lifestyle that a lot of drivers fall into. He keeps things simple, stays relatively low-key, and doesn't seem interested in proving anything through money. There's also a strong sense that he understands the value of what he has. He's been involved in charity work, including donating personal race gear like helmets to support sick children and fundraising efforts. Then there's a world champion who grew up with nothing, and now lives like he doesn't need anything. Kimi Räikkönen. Kimi Räikkönen might be worth hundreds of millions today, but his lifestyle still carries the imprint of one of the toughest upbringings in Formula One. Before the titles, the contracts, and the fame, his childhood looked nothing like the polished world he eventually stepped into. He grew up in a small, hand-built home in Finland that didn't even have basic plumbing, no indoor bathroom, just a simple structure in the middle of a forest. We're talking about an area surrounded by wildlife, where conditions weren't exactly forgiving. But even in that setting, his passion for speed showed up early. As a kid, he wasn't waiting for perfect equipment or ideal conditions. His family couldn't afford it. Instead, his dad built him a homemade go-kart, and that's what he used to get started. As he got older and began competing, the financial pressure only got worse. Karting isn't cheap, and every race adds more strain. At one point, his father was working multiple jobs just to keep him on track. They even used an old van as a mobile workshop to support his racing. It was all very makeshift, but it worked. And that kind of background doesn't just disappear once the money starts coming in. Even after becoming a world champion and one of the highest paid drivers in the sport, Kimi never really shifted into a flashy lifestyle. He's always been known for keeping things simple, avoiding unnecessary attention, and doing things on his own terms. Yes, there were moments earlier in his career where he leaned into a more chaotic lifestyle, but even that felt more like personality than luxury. These days, he's much more focused on family and living quietly. Next up, a driver who could afford anything he wants, but still chooses to live like a college kid. Lando Norris. Lando Norris might have grown up with serious money behind him, but the way he lives today feels way more stripped back than you'd expect from a Formula One star worth tens of millions. On paper, he has every reason to lean into luxury. Big contracts, sponsorships, a rising profile in the sport, it's all there. But when you actually look at his day-to-day habits, it's surprisingly basic. For starters, his routine is about as simple as it gets. While most people imagine elite athletes surrounded by chefs and five-star meals, Lando's go-to is literally just chicken, rice, and water. It's the same story with his clothing. He could easily be walking around in designer outfits every day, but instead, he sticks to hoodies. Not as a statement, not as a brand move, just because they're comfortable. That mindset carries over into how he handles fame too. Lando isn't trying to look like the richest guy in the room. If anything, he seems more interested in blending in. Even when traveling, he prioritizes comfort over appearance, focusing on staying rested and ready rather than looking sharp for cameras. It's a very keep it simple and get the job done kind of approach. At the track, that same grounded attitude shows up in small ways. One of his regular habits before before a race is going around and fist-bumping every member of his team. It's not a big, dramatic gesture, but it says a lot about how he sees things. For him, it's not just about being the driver, it's about being part of a group. Even after moving to Monaco, which is basically the playground of wealthy athletes, Lando hasn't really changed how he operates. Next up, a driver who had to race in the rain on the wrong tires, just because his family couldn't afford the right ones. Fernando Alonso. Fernando Alonso is one of the greatest drivers Formula One has ever seen, but his story didn't start with resources or comfort. It started with making do. Long before the championships and massive contracts, Alonso was growing up in a working-class family in Spain. His father was a mechanic, his mother worked in a department store, and everything about his early career was built around stretching whatever they had as far as it could go. His first go-kart wasn't bought, it was built. His dad put it together himself, originally for Alonso's sister, but once Fernando got behind the wheel, it was obvious something was different. From that point on, the entire family rallied around him. But support didn't mean financial ease. It meant effort, time, and a lot of improvisation. One of the clearest examples of that came during races in bad weather. While other drivers had proper wet tires, Alonso sometimes had to race on slicks, because that's all they could afford. Imagine trying to compete at a high level while literally having the wrong equipment, and still finding a way to win. That's the kind of environment he developed in. His mother even sewed his racing suits by hand to save money, while his father worked as his mechanic, doing everything possible to keep him competitive. And that mindset has never really left him. Even now, after everything he's achieved, Alonso doesn't come across as someone chasing luxury or trying to show off success. He keeps a relatively low profile, focuses on performance, and still carries that same disciplined, no-nonsense approach to his career and life. And then there's a driver who literally worked as a welder, while his Formula One dream was falling apart. Kevin Magnussen. Kevin Magnussen might have spent a decade in Formula One, but there was a point where his life looked nothing like a racing driver's. In fact, it looked more like a backup plan. When his family could no longer afford to fund his career, Magnussen wasn't on a track. He was in a workshop, working as a welder just to have something to fall back on. And the craziest part is, that version of his life never really left him. Even though his father was a former F1 driver, there was no endless stream of money keeping things afloat. Once the funding dried up, reality hit fast. He's openly said that being a welder wasn't some what-if scenario. It was his actual life for a period of time, tools in hand, doing regular work, not knowing if racing would ever come back. Eventually, things did turn around. A sponsor stepped in, opportunities came back, and he fought his way into Formula One. But even then, nothing was ever fully secure. At one point, after losing his seat, he went through a phase where he had no income at all. He'd spent what he earned early on, and suddenly, everything stopped. His bank cards got blocked, and he couldn't even afford a flight to a test session. His girlfriend at the time had to pay for it just to keep him going. That kind of experience changes how you see everything. Even during his time in Formula One, Magnussen never really bought into the flashy side of the sport. While other drivers leaned into fashion deals and building a public image, he kept things simple. Jeans, sneakers, team gear, nothing over the top. He's even admitted that the whole influencer side of F1 never felt natural to him. Then there's a driver who could have moved to Monaco years ago, but chose to stay right where he started. Sergio Perez. Sergio Perez has the kind of career that could easily support a full-on luxury lifestyle, but the way he's chosen to live tells a very different story. With race wins, major contracts, and a net worth in the tens of millions, he's more than earned the option to relocate to somewhere like Monaco, where so many drivers end up. But instead, Perez has done the opposite. He's stayed in Guadalajara, the same place where he grew up, and that decision alone says a lot. For most drivers, moving to Monaco isn't just about luxury, it's about convenience, taxes, and being surrounded by other elite athletes. But Perez has always leaned towards something more personal. He prefers being close to family, familiar streets, and the environment he knows. He lives in a relatively modest home compared to what he could afford, and he's built his life around staying connected to his roots rather than upgrading everything around him. A big part of that comes down to how he started. Perez got into karting at just 6 years old, and like many drivers, the early years weren't easy. Racing is expensive, and even though he had support, it still required commitment, discipline, and constant travel. That early grind seems to have shaped how he approaches things now. There's no real urge to overcompensate with luxury because he never loses sight of what actually matters to him. Off the track, that shows up in how he prioritizes family. He's married with children and spends a lot of his time focused on them, balancing one of the most intense careers in sports with a grounded home life. Next up, a driver who's known for his big personality, but lives way more low-key than you'd expect, Daniel Ricciardo. Daniel Ricciardo has always been one of the most recognizable faces in Formula One. Big smile, big energy, always joking around. You'd assume that kind of personality comes with an equally flashy lifestyle. But when you look past the surface, the way he actually lives is surprisingly chill. Despite earning millions over his career and racing for some of the biggest teams on the grid, Ricciardo has never really leaned into the whole "look how rich I am" side of things. He keeps things relaxed, doesn't overcomplicate his lifestyle, and seems way more interested in enjoying himself than showing off what he owns. A lot of that comes from how he came up. Like most drivers, his journey started in karting, grinding through the lower categories and working his way up, step by step. There was no instant superstar status. It was years of progression, proving himself, and taking opportunities when they came. That kind of path tends to shape how you see things later on. And with Ricciardo, it's clear he never lost that grounded perspective. One of the best examples of his personality was when he literally used a robot to roam around and interact with fans while he controlled it remotely. It sounds ridiculous, but that's kind of the point. He's not trying to act like a distant celebrity. He actually enjoys connecting with people in a way that feels normal, even if the method is a bit unconventional. Even in the paddock, he doesn't carry himself like someone trying to dominate the spotlight. He's approachable, easygoing, and doesn't seem caught up in status. Next up, a driver who left home at just 14 and built his career while dealing with pressure, loneliness, and constant financial uncertainty, Franco Colapinto. While a lot of drivers grow up within Europe's racing system, Colapinto had to leave Argentina at just 14 years old and move across the world to chase the same dream. And that decision came with a cost that goes way beyond money. From that point on, life became a mix of independence and isolation. He was living alone in a completely different country, dealing with a new language, a new environment, and the pressure of performing, all at an age where most people are still in school with their families around them. And while European drivers could go home after races and reset, Colapinto often didn't have that option. After tough weekends, it was just him. On top of that, there was the constant financial pressure. Unlike drivers with secured backing, Colapinto's career has been shaped by uncertainty. There were times where he didn't even know if he'd be racing in a season until the last minute. Budgets weren't guaranteed, testing was limited, and every step forward depended on finding sponsors and making things work with what was available. Even when he started winning and getting results, that pressure didn't fully go away. He's openly talked about how strange it feels to reach the start of a season and still not know if you'll be able to complete it. That kind of instability isn't something most people associate with professional drivers, but for him, it became normal. And that experience clearly shapes how he sees things now. There's no sense of entitlement, no rush toward luxury. If anything, there's a quiet focus on progression, on making the most of every opportunity, and on staying connected to the people who helped him get there. Then there's a 4-time world champion who avoids attention so much. You'd barely know he's one of the richest drivers on the grid. Sebastian Vettel. Sebastian Vettel is one of the most successful drivers in Formula One history, but if you looked at how he lives, you'd never guess it. 4 world championships, years at the top of the sport, and a massive net worth. Yet he's built a lifestyle that's almost the complete opposite of what you'd expect. For starters, he's completely absent from social media. In a sport where most drivers are constantly posting, promoting, and building their brand, Vettel just doesn't bother. No Instagram, no Twitter, nothing. And that's not by accident. He's always been someone who values privacy over visibility, choosing to keep his personal life out of the spotlight as much as possible. That same mindset shows up in how he spends his time away from racing. When he's not at the track, he's not chasing luxury experiences or putting himself himself in high-profile environments. He's at home with his family. That's it. In interviews, when he's been asked what he does after a race weekend, his answer is about as simple as it gets. He goes home, hugs his kids, spends time with his wife, and just enjoys being present. And a big part of that comes from how he views success. Vettel never really leaned into the celebrity side of Formula One. Even during his dominant years with Red Bull, when he was winning titles back-to-back, he kept a relatively low profile compared to others around him. He focused on racing, and outside of that, he kept things quiet. Next up, a world champion who made millions, but still spends a huge part of his time giving it away. Jenson Button. Jenson Button has had the kind of Formula One career that sets you up for life. A world championship, years of solid contracts, endorsements. Money was never really an issue, but instead of building a lifestyle around luxury, Button has always leaned more toward keeping things grounded and using what he has to actually make an impact. Even during his peak years, when he was winning races and dominating the 2009 season, he never came across as someone chasing excess. He was known for being calm, composed, and pretty down-to-earth compared to the typical image of an elite driver, and that attitude didn't change once the big paychecks started coming in. One of the biggest ways this shows up is through his charity work. Button didn't just donate here and there and call it a day, he built something around it. The Jenson Button Trust has supported multiple causes over the years, from helping sick children to funding cancer research. He's also organized events like triathlons specifically to raise money, which takes way more effort than just writing a check. There's also a more personal side to it. After the 2011 earthquake and tsunami in Japan, Button was deeply affected, especially since Japan had played such a big role in his career. Instead of just acknowledging it, he actively helped raise funds and support those impacted. Then there's a driver who became one of the richest in the sport, the name you've all been waiting for. Lewis Hamilton. Lewis might be one of the highest-paid drivers in Formula One history, but the way he carries himself still reflects where he came from. Before the championships, before the global fame, his journey was built on sacrifice. His dad was working multiple jobs at one point just to keep him racing, putting in long hours to fund a career that had no guarantees. And early on, Hamilton didn't have the best equipment either. He wasn't always the kid with the fastest kart or the newest gear, but what he did have was consistency, discipline, and a mindset that pushed him to make the most out of whatever he had. That kind of start doesn't just disappear once the money starts rolling in. Even now, with everything he's achieved, Hamilton doesn't come across as someone defined by luxury. Yes, he's into fashion, music, and different creative outlets, but none of it feels like he's trying to prove his wealth. If anything, it feels like he's exploring interests beyond racing, rather than leaning into a flashy lifestyle. What really stands out is how connected he still is to his roots. He's spoken multiple times about his upbringing and the effort it took from his family to get him into the sport, and you can see that awareness in how he uses his platform today. Whether it's speaking on social issues, equality, or environmental concerns, he's clearly focused on something bigger than just racing. There's also a simplicity in how he talks about life outside the track. He appreciates small things, values purpose, and doesn't seem caught up in constantly upgrading his lifestyle just because he can. Next up, a driver who had to rely on last-minute funding just to keep racing, and never really forgot what that felt like. Liam Lawson. Liam Lawson might finally have a full-time seat in Formula One, but getting there was anything but smooth. At multiple points in his career, whether he raced or not came down to one thing: money. As he climbed through the lower categories, the costs kept rising, and there were moments where his journey nearly stopped altogether. One of the biggest turning points came when a major financial backer stepped in with a huge amount of funding at exactly the right time. Without that support, there's a very real chance his career would have stalled before he even got close to Formula One. That kind of uncertainty sticks with you. Lawson didn't come up with guaranteed backing or a clear path. Every step forward depended on results, connections, and whether the funding could be secured in time. There were seasons where things weren't locked in until the last minute, and that constant pressure creates a very different mindset compared to drivers who never had to worry about it. Even now, after reaching Formula One, there's still a noticeable sense of patience and appreciation in how he talks about his journey. He understands how many things had to go right, how many people had to step in, and how close it all came to not happening. That perspective naturally carries into how he lives. He doesn't come across as someone trying to immediately jump into a flashy lifestyle or prove anything through money. If anything, there's more focus on making the opportunity count rather than celebrating it with excess. For Lawson, getting to Formula One wasn't guaranteed. It was earned step by step, with a lot of uncertainty along the way. And when you come through that kind of path, you tend to stay grounded, no matter what level you reach. Which of these drivers would you trade lives with? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. And before you leave, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Grid Rivals so you don't miss the next ones.